Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. If you want insight into the kind of person Jack Smith is, and I'm basing this just on his conduct, you don't have to look very far. There are so many creatures inside the Beltway like Smith, particularly in the Trump era. Let me give you an example of what I mean. This is Joe Scarborough. It's a little 2020 flashback. See how well this Joe Scarborough rant aged. But what were the consequences for it? Promotion, more money, more airtime, more influence. Joe Scarborough in 2020, when he was still trying to climb up and be somebody. I think it's before he and Mika got together.
And how did they get together?
Anyway, Scarborough talking about the Hunter Biden laptop in advance of the 2020 election.
This is classic.
And, of course, the whole matter of the Russian collusion investigation and Bob Mueller, special prosecutor, heading up that investigation that beset most of Trump's first term.
And talk about Facebook having problems and Twitter having problems with a story that even the New York Post knew was a lie. They published a series of lies peddled to them by Rudy Giuliani, who admitted that nobody else would take it but Rupert Murdoch's New York Post, because they might look into it and tell the truth. Here we are in 2020. This is what it's come down to, America. Giuliani is feeding Russian misinformation to Donald Trump and feeding Russian disinformation to the New York Post. They know it's a lie.
Yeah, well,
that's where we are in 2020.
The New York Post
just to let you know that they're still talking to Russians. And by the way, Russian hoax, come on. Really, seriously, history will expose you all as fools and useful idiots for the Russians. It's for 4 years now. For 4 years now, there has been a line from Russian agents into the campaign. It's unbelievable how stupid you think Americans are. How stupid you think Americans are. For you can just say Russian hoax. Seriously, it's the idiocy, the sheer idiocy. You are revealed right now, but you will be revealed throughout history for basically running cover for Russians.
Yeah. Well, you will be revealed throughout history, be exposed as useful idiots. Yeah. The New York Post knew they were lying about something that's true. And we've talked to Emma Jo Morris, who broke the story for New York Post now at Breitbart News many times. She knew she had the story and the truth of it, and she ran with it and never changed her story, despite all of the propagandizing by the Scarboroughs of the world. But that's what you're dealing with. That's what you're dealing with in Jack Smith. That's what you're dealing with respect to the posture of the entire D.C. establishment towards Trump and Trump supporters and anybody who doesn't fold into the orthodoxy with the enthusiasm that Scarborough does. And Jack Smith certainly has enthusiasm. For more on this, pleased to be joined by James Burnham, former senior associate counsel to the president, deputy assistant attorney general at DOJ, and counselor to the attorney general. He is now the principal at King Street Legal. James Burnham, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So, part of what we see here, too, is the Joe Scarboroughing of Eileen Canon, the judge in the classified documents case that dismissed the case after the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity, and also had choice words on the idea that Jack Smith is a legitimate special prosecutor. And the reaction was the same thing, basically, just ad hominem from the legal community and outside the legal community, but inside the Beltway towards Canon.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, rather than engage with her decision on the merits, and it's a well-reasoned 93-page opinion, everybody just attacked her as some sort of toady in an attempt to delegitimize her refusal to let Jack Smith steamroll the former president in that case. It was very unfortunate.
And now Jack Smith's back with a superseding indictment, same charges. It's a skinny version of the previous indictment, if you will. And your perspective on that superseding indictment that was rolled out yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think, basically Smith and his team appear bound and determined to go on a collision course with the Supreme Court. It sort of has a dynamic of banging your head against the wall until the wall falls down on you, by maintaining the same indictment in substance, but making a few cosmetic changes. The only substantive allegation I think they removed was the interactions between then President Trump and the Justice Department, both the Attorney General Bill Barr and then later one of the other officials. Otherwise, it's basically the same indictment. And so it does not seem to me that they've taken the Supreme Court's opinion to heart. It does not seem to me that they are trying to sort of abide by the spirit and the letter of the decision. It seems instead like they are determined to bring the exact same case, albeit with slightly different clothing, and hope that they can just push it through and that the Supreme Court will, in effect, let them get away with it. And
Canon is still the judge on the case, right?
Well, no, these are separate. So the one with the new indictment is in Washington, D.C., in front of Judge Chutkan, a judge I've been in front of many times. Who's an Obama appointee. Right. The Canon case is the documents case, the one involving mostly post-presidential conduct. And so a simpler case from a substantive legal perspective, although it does have the same special counsel question about whether Smith has the authority to act at all.
And that's something that Canon referenced in her dismissal of the case in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, there's a very plausible argument that the Attorney General cannot just take any person he wants anywhere in the world. Smith he's an American, of course, but he was living in Europe during war crimes prosecutions, and give him the extraordinary power of a special counsel. The way they fund these things, there's an old unlimited appropriation from the independent counsel days. So there was a statute, as I'm sure you're aware, in the 80s and 90s that allowed the appointment of an independent counsel. That statute lapsed because it was an unmitigated disaster over and over again. So Congress wisely let it go. There's an old statute that says that office gets unlimited funding. The Justice Department now uses that as its justification for funding special counsels. It's quite extraordinary. And so Canon, I think, said, you just can't do this. Between the Constitution's Appointments Clause and the way the appropriations provisions work, you can't just take some random person and put them in charge of prosecuting whoever they want with an unlimited budget. And so I think that's a very reasonable decision that's going to get tested now on appeal.
We had Professor William Jacobson from Cornell Law on earlier in the program, and you raised the issue of the timing of this superseding indictment. That right, this is not a case that's going to wind its way to a decision before November 5th, certainly. And so this is about the headlines and in advance of the debate, and something to pick up and remind people that Trump has all of these legal travails and they can make the same accusations against him that are contained in the indictment and so on, and this ongoing legal matter, and see how it plays out and all the things they've been saying about these various indictments that Trump has faced.
So I guess I have two thoughts. I mean, one is it is very close to the election, obviously, for them to be doing something like this. And I think it would have been a more prudent choice, although prudence is not really defined in this prosecution, to ask Judge Chutkan to sort of basically put things on ice until after the election, and then we can figure out where we are. I think from their perspective, they had a hearing set on September 5th to figure out the way forward after the Supreme Court's decision, and probably thought they needed to get ahead of it with something, basically with their plan for moving forward. I just think the much more prudent and wise course would have been to not do this now for the reasons you just gave, which just pours fuel on the fire in the middle of, early voting starts in like 2 weeks. And so this is an extraordinary thing for the Justice Department to be doing basically on the eve of the election.
Yeah, a more restrained attorney general or or present Attorney General, then Merrick Garland would have put a chill on this, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem is, of course, with special counsels, the institution. The whole point of a special counsel is that they're not really supervised, and so you end up with this sort of myopic behavior. The prosecutor's a hammer and the defendant is a nail, and so they view their role, I mean, not unreasonably, as basically bring this case at all costs, push it through at all costs, and get the convictions that they think their job is to get. The Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General are supposed to provide a broader perspective and say, okay, I understand that you think this is good for the case, but we have to think about the country, the election, the broader interests of justice. And here, basically they're just not doing that. It does not seem. They're letting Smith do whatever he wants, and Smith is doing what people in these offices invariably do, which is maximum aggression and minimum restraint.
Right, and then the overseers have can play Pontius Pilate and say, well, it's independent. We just have to let the investigation go wherever, and the prosecution go wherever it's going to go, and our hands are tied.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's the other half of that bad dynamic. And
the pending decision from Merchant in the Manhattan case. I mean, I know this is a state level matter, but the Alvin Bragg also trying to play Pontius Pilate a little bit in terms of not opposing a postponement of the sentence past September 18th. But we're waiting with bated breath for Merchant to weigh in. What do you think happens there?
So I don't have any real sense of Judge Merchant, and so I don't know. But I think the Manhattan DA is signaling pretty strongly that this is best left for after the election, for all kinds of reasons, political, legal, prudential. And I would hope that Judge Merchant agrees with that and does not force the issue, basically a month or two before the election. I assume that even if he tries to give the former president, or if he does impose rather a jail sentence, that either he or the New York Court of Appeals will basically suspend that sentence pending the president's appeal. And so I think the prospect of someone trying to jail him or something before the election strikes me as infinitesimally small prospect. Mm-hmm. But it would be better for everybody to just put this off until after the election and then figure out where we are.
James Burnham, former Senior Associate Counsel to the President, Deputy Assistant Attorney General at DOJ, and Counselor to the Attorney General. Now the Principal at King Street Legal. James Burnham, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Have a good one. Take care.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the